Hello and welcome to Shoot the Breeze, where we take a nostalgic look at a random football magazine from the past. I'm Andy Smith, aka Scott's Footy Cards on Twitter, and with me is Tom Brogan.
Hello.
In each episode we'll invite a special guest to join us in trawling through the magazine and discuss anything contained within it. This could be anything from an article, to a photograph, to a competition, to an advert. Basically, if it's in it, then we'll talk about it. So sit back and let's shoot the breeze.
Wriggles clear, might just get the chip, and he does, he's scored! Oh, what a great backlash! He's done it! Oh, brilliant! Wiggling his way, that's an excellent one, and Dini! It's a goal, that's four for Clydebank. Excellent play by Hughes, I think the player of the match, and sweetly finished by Penny.
And this week our guest is Jonathan Wilson. Jonathan's editor of The Blizzard, co-host of their Greatest Games podcast, writes for The Guardian and The Observer, among other publications. And he's also the author of several books, including Inverting The Pyramid, The Anatomy of Manchester United, Angels with Dirty Faces, The Footballing History of Argentina, and The Names Heard Long Ago, How the Golden Age of Hungarian Football Shaped the Modern Game. Thanks very much for coming along, Jonathan.
Yes, thanks very much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I'll hand over to Tom to go through this week's magazine.
So the magazine we're looking at this week is Shoot from the 3rd of August 1974. It's a post-World Cup edition. There's not too much on the front cover compared to other magazines we've looked at. We've got Peter Osgood in the front cover in a Southampton kit, and the three articles that it's trailing on the front page: World Cup final in colour, the Ramsey record, and the six-figure stars. It's 8 pence. This is Shoot incorporating goal. And other wee thing to notice is that this particular copy was reserved by Mr. Watson and his local newsagent. So, anything else we want to say about the front cover?
Well, it would drive me mad if my newsagent was writing my name on the... maybe not on a paper, but on a magazine, which I might be collecting. I wouldn't want that kind of damage. It's weird, isn't it, that this was obviously always designed as a post-World Cup magazine. And yet the picture put on the front page is of a, I don't know what age he is by now, but a 30-something Peter Osgood, past his prime, playing for Southampton. I mean, it's a perfectly okay picture, but it's not a real, striking picture. So it just seems a slightly odd cover to go for. I mean, I guess it fits in with the six-figure stars article, about the transfers that summer, but it still seems a bit weird to me.
It's a good point. I mean, it is a World Cup focused magazine, so I never thought about that, but it does make sense. The thing that I noticed from it as well was normally it has a few other countries, the prices, but this one there's quite a few. There's Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Rhodesia, Nigeria, Malaysia, Norway, Sweden, can't even read some of these, Malta, Spain, and Holland and Italy. So there's quite a few in there, which we don't normally have.
All right, so we go inside then and look at the first couple of pages. Pages 2 and 3 are the Ramsey records. Okay, so this is not long after Alf Ramsey's left the England job, Don Revie's taken over, and Shoot here is looking at all Alf Ramsey's games. This is an absolute goldmine of information at that time, where you couldn't easily lay your hands on stuff like this. It's got all the games that Alf Ramsey took charge of England and all the players that Alf Ramsey capped. Do you want to maybe delve into this one, Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, I find this fascinating, and it's very sort of world soccer in style of a lot of stats, a lot of data, and the point you make there, I think, is the key one. That this wasn't readily available. It wasn't you could just click online and get it within 10 seconds.
Yeah,
I do wonder though, like, who was actually sitting there reading this? Who was going through going, oh look, they played, I don't know how many games that is, 17 games in 1966. It seems, because having worked in newspapers and magazines, I know this would take quite a long time to put together. Not even just in terms of collating the data, but in terms of laying it out and getting it all precise. So this is quite labour intensive for something that I'm guessing most people just skim through. Now, what I don't know there is that, am I just looking at that from a point of view of somebody who's essentially grown up in the era of the internet? I mean, I remember having to refer to Rothmans when I very, very first started as a journalist. But I'd love to know whether, I mean, what sort of market was She's aimed at? It was aimed at sort of late teens, early 20s market. Does that sound about right?
I don't even think it was that old. I think it was sort of maybe early teens, sort of 12, 13 to maybe 18. But
so, I mean, were they really pouring through this stuff? I don't know. I mean, the thing that's interesting to me there is the list of players that Ramsey called up, and that's the kind of thing you might see in a modern paper. Because I think it's is it 101 players he called up?
Yeah, 101. Yeah,
in his 11 years. And that's the kind of thing you might see in a modern paper, because it is genuinely striking that he would call up that many.
Yeah.
And then the text that goes with it on the that bit in the pink sort of sidebar on the left is very brief. It's quite punchy, talking about him as being aloof. So there's sort of a real effort to sort of penetrate what made him, and this sort of it makes a contrast between the public perception of him as this sort of quite distant figure and the fact all the players called him Alf. Whereas when you then talk to players, no, he was totally aloof. We just called him Alf. But yeah, there's a great Jack Charlton line. He says, somebody says to him, "What was Alf Ramsey like?" And he says, "I don't know. I only played for him for 6 years." So I find him a fascinating guy. I think we now, it's in England, I think we massively underappreciate him. I think because he was the sort of figure he was, and he was very reluctant to explain things, very suspicious of the press. I don't think we quite realised just how radical what he was doing was. And when you look at the sort of how football generally developed, Ramsey stands alongside Rainer Michels and Lobanovsky as a pioneer, or Maslow maybe rather than Lobanovsky, as a pioneer of pressing. He just didn't call it pressing and didn't talk about it. And you can say that the way those seeds then grew in an English environment or British environment did not lead to the riches that the seeds that Michaels or Maslow planted did. But I've read so many things sort of saying, "Oh, winning the World Cup was the worst thing that could have happened for England." And I mean, from English people, I mean, obviously you think that, but that it somehow sort of stymied development and got England stuck in this sort of rigid 4-4-2 mentality. And it just seems to me sort of a bonkers way of thinking. I mean, it's not like there's all these other tournaments we won that we can afford to chuck the one we did win away. But the way he won it was by doing something totally different. He changed the shape of the midfield. And the famous story of the final friendly before the World Cup in '66, and England played away in Wrocław against Poland. And Ramsey was a very understated, very suspicious of emotion. And he read out the team to the press the day before the game. And he went to it, and everybody's expecting, he reads out the first 10 names, and everybody's expecting the 11th to be a winger. And he says, "A number 11. And then he holds a dramatic pause and starts to stand up, Martin Peters. And he's out of the room before anybody can react to it, because he doesn't want to explain what he's doing. And that's the beginning of the wingless wonders. Uh-huh. And then the great thing about Ramsey, and the thing is, what we don't know is, did he do this because he wasn't quite confident in what he was doing, or was he, as I suspect, hiding away his innovation because he didn't want people to see it? But the 3 group games of that World Cup, he played with a winger, and it was only for the game against Argentina in the quarterfinal he went wingless again. And he'd done it against Spain in December '65. He did it in Wrocław in what would have been May or June '66, and then from the quarterfinals onwards. But I genuinely think he worked out that was the way, against good teams, that was the way he was going to play. But he didn't want to do it in the group stage because he didn't want to alert the rest of the world to what he was doing. And so that culture of secrecy, I think, has led to him being underappreciated. People just don't realise he was a really radical football thinker. And of course, he played in the 2 great England humiliations of the early 50s. He played against USA in 1950 when England lost 1-0. and he'd played against Hungary in the 6-3 defeat in 1953. So he'd had and that was at the time when he was playing for Arthur Rowe's Tottenham, who were very radical. So he came from this radical background, and he saw the limitations of a traditional approach. Of course, he was going to be radical. What he did with Ipswich, to take Ipswich from the third division to the top division and win the league with them in their first season in the top division, was incredible. But we sort of somehow we've lost sight of what was incredible about it, and we've sort of become a little bit resentful of other people who came after him played slightly boring football in a similar shape, which seems to me, deeply unfair on him.
I guess it's like the Scottish version of that would have potentially been Craig Levein when he radically played with no strikers and never quite. Yeah,
but that was a goalless draw against Czech Republic, wasn't it? I mean, it's not quite winning the World Cup, but goalless.
If history had maybe taken a different turn, maybe we could be looking at a World Cup victory for Scotland. But
so looking at the main Alf capped, obviously there's a lot of legends in there, the 66 guys, as well as Shilton and Keegan and Emlyn Hughes and all that. Are there any names that pop out for you there, Jonathan, that we might not kind of think of as sort of great England players or guys that never got much of a turn in an England shirt?
Well, I mean, he was beginning to reshape the team in the qualifiers for 74. And he actually gets really unlucky there. He probably was over loyal to the 66 core for too long. But Bobby Moore was the game away against Poland in the qualifiers for 74. Bobby Moore was a disaster. Responsible for one of the goals, was all over the place, and he probably did. I mean, yes, it's a very common failing in managers to be too loyal. But I think he had begun to sort of try and introduce some of those more maverick players of the 70s. So you look down that list and you see people like Ralph Coates. I mean, okay, not a maverick, but sort of a more sort of skillful, more creative player. Who else is in there? He brought in John Hollins, who played for Chelsea, who was part of that team. Kevin Hector had come in. There was an attempt to begin to modernise, and that game, that game against Poland at Wembley, the 1-1 draw, the Tomaszewski game, and Tomaszewski's was interviewed later in this issue. England were, I mean, it's ridiculous that game had such consequences, because England are really good in that game. They had, 30 chances to 2 or something, but Shilton makes a terrible mistake and Tomaszewski has the game of his life. And because of that, Ramsey is sacked. Now, there had been the defeat to West Germany at Wembley in 72 in the quarterfinal of the European Championship. It's the first sort of, I mean, that's a slightly odd game as well. It's misremembered that Germany were brilliant for half an hour and could have been 4 or 5-0 up. They were 1-0 up. But England actually got back into the game. They levelled it at 1-1. And because it was a 2-legged game, he got a bit carried away chasing a winner and got done on the break twice by Gert Müller. And 3-1 was probably a fair reflection of the game. But Germany just had a first sort of 25, 30 minutes where they played. Franz Beckenbauer said he'd never played in a team that played anywhere near that level. But that was sort of used as Alf's fallen behind, and maybe he had to an extent. I mean that happens. You're radical, and then other people catch up and surpass you. But you do wonder what might have happened if he'd stayed on and been allowed to rebuild after the failure for 74.
It's quite interesting. The spread of different teams amongst those players is quite large. I mean, you've got Burnley, you've got Sheffield United, Blackburn, I saw Watford. So, I mean, there's players coming from loads of different teams.
Yeah, I mean, Tony Curry, the Sheffield United player, he's another one of those sort of very skilled 70s players who Ramsey tried to bring in. But I think that's, I mean, it's obvious, isn't it? The spread of talent was spread much more through the division in those days. I mean, that's something I sort of felt generally kind of flicking through this, that all the names are sort of British names. And it's actually, I mean, this is more my feeling than anything else. But since Sunderland got relegated to League One, it's changed slightly this season. But essentially, Sunderland have only ever signed, they've just signed English, Scottish, and Irish players. And I find them really hard to tell apart because they've all got quite similar names. Because I get used to kind of, the Macedonian lad. The Brazilian lad. And now I'm just sort of faced with this. It's like reading a was like flicking through a phone book from like Leeds in 1975. It's just sort of like every name is an English Irish name. But yeah, it is. Yeah, of course, it's a step back into that world because that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, we'll look at that later on because one of the questions Billy Bremner gets asked in his column is about continental players coming to play in England. So we'll touch on that a wee bit later. Will we go over the page now, Andy? So ask the expert. So you've already shoehorned a mention of Sunderland in, but there is actually a mention of Sunderland here in that wee bit about League Cup. There's a question there about from Keith Edwards of Lichfield, who said, I've read Wolves won the League Cup 1941-42, but a friend of mine says the cup was not introduced until 1960-61. Could you please settle our argument? And Shoot says, your friend is quite right, Keith, when he says the League Cup, at any rate, the one we now know, wasn't introduced till the 1960-61 season. But during the war years, when normal competitions were suspended, there was another national competition, which went under the title of the League War Cup. Wolves won this in 1941-42, beating Sunderland 6-3 on aggregate in a two-legged final. You tell us any more about that competition, Jonathan, or that final?
No, not specifically about that, but I think wartime football is a genuinely fascinating topic. In the First World War, the English League carried on for a season. It didn't finish till the summer of 1915, and the league was very heavily criticised for that. The idea being these were fit young men who could have been fighting who weren't. And then you got the footballers' battalions as a reaction to that. But the Second World War was, as ever, the administrators are fighting the last war. And so as soon as war's declared, the English League stops, which 3 games into the season with Blackpool top of the table at the beginning of September. And what's amazing is, a month later, it all just starts again because they've realised, actually, we need football. We need something for people to go and watch. But it doesn't start as the proper league. It's these regionalised leagues and these cup competitions, which would be 2-legged, so that both teams would get a home gate. Yeah. So they're guaranteed the revenue from that. Some of those stories from those games are. Players could play for more than one club because often they'd be stationed somewhere, away from the club they were registered to. So it was a lot looser, but they got huge attendances. So there was a game at Wembley. I can't remember which year it would have been, but they tried to kick off early so that people would be home before dark, and they just didn't manage. There's 60,000 people at Wembley in the dark while the Luftwaffe are raiding. It was just sort of ludicrous sort of things happening. But most of the rest of the year just kept going. Germany football didn't finish till April 1945. So there's a Hungarian called Alfred Schoffer. I was reminded of him last week, the week before, as I was taking a train through southern Germany. I was going from Paris to Vienna, and I went near a place called what's it called? PreMatch, which is sort of this resort. And Schoffer he coached in Italy. He won the league with Roma. So I think there's only him and Capello who've ever won the league with Roma. Lito must have done it in the 80s as well. So the 3 of them won the league with Roma. But he won the league with Roma in the early 40s. Goes back to Budapest. There's a network in Budapest of sort of sports people, coaches who they help distribute fake ID cards to Jews and communists to save them after Germany invades in March 44, after Hungary tried to sign a separate peace with the Allies. And so there's a proper crackdown on the horrific deportations to Auschwitz. I think 800,000 Hungarian Jews died in 3 months, but also communists are being pursued as well. So they were distributing these fake ID cards, which you're getting from the Admiralty, from somebody called Istvan Tóth, who had been a great player at Ferencváros and become a coach, and then gets his job in the Admiralty. He's able to steal blank ID cards and makes them out. But they also then got in touch with, or the American intelligence got in touch with them, the OSS, and they were providing details on troop positions, and they had plans to sabotage the bridges in Budapest if necessary. And he worked with them for a while. Then he weirdly suddenly gets appointed Bayern Munich coach early in 1945, and they're on the verge of winning the Bavarian Championship when the league is stopped in April. But he was found dead in a railway carriage in PreMatch, and nobody knows how he died, because by the time the body was found, this was late 45. It was under American control, and it was just, there's hundreds of thousands of dead bodies. They can't do autopsies on all of them. So the assumption is he had a stroke, but nobody actually knows how he died. Sorry, how did I get onto that? That seems a long way from a question about Sunderland in 1942.
The league, the wartime league cup.
Oh yeah, so German football carries on until April 45. Hungarian football never stops, just keeps going. Even when it's encircled by the Soviets, football just keeps going. So wartime football is a very odd thing.
It seems something that's not talked about very much, and I can't remember any names off the top of my head, but I've read about these massive players who ended up playing for things like Elgin up in little clubs up in Scotland for a game or two and things like that, and all that just seems to have been either forgotten or just people don't seem interested in it because it wasn't the proper league.
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing. It just sort of it's quite hard to explain because players suddenly pop up playing for the wrong clubs, and it's not an official competition. It is outside that. So I think the actual football itself is less interesting than the propaganda use to which it was put. So I started to research this at the beginning of the pandemic, when there was a bit of a furore of should football really be going on? And obviously we had the 100-day break in the Premier League, and actually when it came back, there's still a bit of hang on, are we wasting tests on these players? Is this really the best use of time? And you realise pretty quickly, God, I need football. Like, I'm sitting there, avidly watching Paderborn beat Bremen or something, just because I need to watch, men in coloured shirts running about a grass pitch. That it is this great sort of opiate that sort of we need, not because of what it represents in itself, but because it then allows you to discuss it on Twitter or in newspapers or podcasts like this one. Yeah.
All right. Anything else we see there on that Ask the Expert page?
Well, how many of these? How many of these do you think are real? I suspect this is just the editors. Oh Christ, we've got to fill up a page. Let's ask ourselves questions we already know the answers to. I mean, what colours did Dynamo Moscow wear? Do people really reckon in? I know. Again, it's like you can't just look it up online.
Yeah.
Do people really care about that? It's like, is somebody really going to write to a magazine to find out the answer to that? Like, ring up the Russian embassy if you want to, or the Soviet embassy if you want to find out. So it just seems a very odd use of.
I mean, it was something I was going to note about this, and we've already talked about it with the previous two pages with all the information. It used to be if you wanted to know something, you would either have to look up reference books or write into a magazine or a newspaper and hope that your question gets answered, and then you have to hope that you don't miss it getting printed that single day.
Yeah.
And it's like now, everything's obviously at the end of a Google search. I mean, just like the one where he's asking about the Arsenal Sturm Graz result, how did they get in the competition? And information like that is just at our fingertips. But what I did, I found interesting the way how they've described Lazio in that. So they actually call them Lazio Rome, which
right,
I'd never heard them called that before. But yeah, people have asked this before about how many of these are actually real, and especially if you get £1 for each one, that's going straight into the kitty for the tea time drinks, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, having worked in newspapers, I know that often you just have to fill up the space, and there's ways of doing that.
Anything we want to see about the football funnies?
Yeah, they're not funny. I don't understand most of them. Like,
Andy hates cartoons and shit.
Yeah,
okay. I understand the first one, the middle bottom one. I get what the joke's supposed to be. The others, I don't even understand what the joke's supposed to be.
Yes, see my whole thing and Tom and others have sort of got me to appreciate the artwork a bit more, but like yourself, I just don't find them funny. And the same with Robbie at the bottom there. I'm sorry, and I don't think I would even laughed at them. I mean, 74, so I was only 2 at the time, but I don't think I would have laughed at them at the time when I was younger, because I just don't think they're any good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
I kind of defend the artists because they're kind of, as well as doing this, they're probably knocking out cartoons for car magazines and for cricket magazines and stuff at the same time. So I do occasionally defend the artists, but I'm not arguing with you that they're not fun.
Sometimes it's indefensible.
So we go over the page again. So on the ball with Billy Bremner, and England would have enriched the World Cup. So this is again after the World Cup, and Billy Bremner's talking a little bit about Scotland, where he picks out Jim. Well, he's actually answering readers' questions because his biggest regret is he can't reply to each one personally. And so he's asked about which Scottish players impressed you most in West Germany. All of them. I was proud of each and every one, but if I had to single out anybody, it would be Big Jim Holton and Joe Jordan. That's the first thing he says, and I hope and sincerely believe that Scotland did Great Britain proud. While we were playing for Scotland, first and foremost, I think fans of England and other home countries were rooting for us. And then, as I was saying earlier on, he gets asked a question there about continental players coming into English football. I have my doubts whether they could survive 50 or 60 games at our level of football. I heard Johan Cruyff admit the other week that one reason he left Ajax was that there were only half a dozen difficult matches each season. He'd find there no easy matches in England. I'm sure that superstars like Johan could adapt, but speaking generally, I believe the Continentals would find our soccer very exhausting. And then he goes on to say, cricket is benefited by having West Indians and other nationalities in the county sides, but cricket was dying and needed a shot in the arm. Your thoughts on that, Jonathan?
Well, I think it's the stuff on the international or the overseas players. It's the interesting thing because it was only the late 70s when, certainly in English football, that foreign players were allowed. So when Ardiles and Ricky Bisha came in to Spurs, that was sort of the first wave, and you got a whole load of Eastern Bloc players who were allowed to leave when they hit 28. So you had, Ante Mirocevic went from Buduknost to Sheffield Wednesday. Of all the culture clashes, this very sort of diminutive, technical Montenegrin, and I think he actually stayed with Jack Charlton in his house for a while. And I must have been in England Montenegro game a few years ago. I remember interviewing him just beforehand, and him sort of saying that he'd just be forced to play dominoes for hours with Jack Charlton, or dragged off to go fishing. I had no idea what he was doing. Just sort of, Jack's going fishing, you're coming with him, and being sent on, army assault courses in pre-season to get fit, and he's sort of like, "Where's the ball? Like, can we just kick the ball a bit, please?" So there was obviously a huge difference. I think with Bremner as well, that point about the number of games, the number of hard games. No side has suffered that as much as Leeds.
Yeah.
And you look now and you sort of think, the number of times. I've just done a book on the Charlton brothers, which will be out later this year. And so looked a lot at Jack and Leeds, late 60s, early 70s. And the number of times they go into April still able to win 3 or 4 competitions and end up winning one of them or none of them because they're manifestly knackered. You just sort of think it was almost like they were too good for that era, that in a later era, they'd have had a squad 4 or 5 players bigger and they could have rotated. But the game in 1970, so let me get this right. I think it was a game over Easter, and they'd lost 1-0 in the first leg of the European Cup semi to Celtic at home. And then I think it was the Wednesday after Easter, they had the second leg, where Bremner scores a brilliant goal in that game. but they played Derby on, I think, Easter Monday. So 2 days before that game on the Wednesday. Is that true, or have I slightly... No, that must have been slightly, because I think they had the cup final on the Saturday, didn't they? Yeah, Celtic had the cup final as well on the Saturday. So yeah, it must have been a week or two earlier. They played Derby, fielded a weekend team, and got fined by the FA for fielding a weekend team. But it was in the middle of this crazy run of fixtures of European Cup semis, the cup final, and they couldn't win the league. So why wouldn't you rest players? It's sort of it seems absurd to modernise, but Clough was furious about it. Clough was a Derby manager at the time. Clough was furious about it. And loads of fans were furious because he said they'd only got in the ground when they found out that Leeds weren't playing their full-strength team, and they felt they'd been cheated with the ticket price. Whereas now, if you go and watch, even West Ham on, I don't know when you're going to put this out, but on the Sunday before Easter Monday against Arsenal, didn't play Mikel Antonio, rested a few other players because they knew they had Eintracht Frankfurt coming up on the Thursday. Liverpool at Newcastle on Saturday rested half a dozen players because they knew they had Villarreal coming up. And we just sort of think that's standard practice, but 50 years ago, it really wasn't.
Yeah.
And the other point about that is that I think it's really interesting he draws a comparison with county cricket.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the cricket comparison. Yeah.
And again, I guess being in Leeds, being in Yorkshire, maybe gives them an awareness of cricket that you wouldn't have had at other clubs. But I think cricket was just much bigger then. And clearly, I mean, I think it's one of the great things of cricket in that period, not just the county game, but huge stars, particularly West Indian stars, turning out for club sides. In my local club in North East, Whitburn, they were taken over in 1962 by a bloke called Sid Collins, who was the vice chairman of Sunderland Football Club, and he wanted to develop part of the land that the stadium was on, the stadium, the pitch with the 3 benches was on. But it was attached to an old manor house, and he wanted to redevelop the manor house was in fallen disrepair. He wanted to redevelop that as flats. So he bought the club, and the legally, the cricket club will always have rights to that land. That cannot be sold. But he wanted to get the village on board for his redevelopment. And they finished bottom of the Durham Senior League because it's a small village. They have no money. And they're going up against Durham City and Sunderland and Wearmouth and big clubs, CM Harbour. And so he went into the AGM knowing nothing about cricket and said, we can't finish bottom. This is not happening. What can we do? And somebody said, well, we haven't had a pro for 5 years. Every other club's got a pro. And then, what do you mean a pro? And normally a pro just meant, a 40-year-old who played county cricket 10 years earlier. And he said, well, who's the best player we can get? And they went, well, Lance Gibbs is out of contract at Burnley, but, we're not going to get Lance Gibbs. He said, well, how much will it cost? I went, well, I don't know, $1,000? He said, yeah, of course we can have Lance Gibbs. Go and get him. And so Whitburn, this tiny village, buys the best player, the best bowler in the world at the time. And, they still only won 1 championship with him, but in 3 years. But, suddenly you were turning up at this tiny little village ground watching the greatest spin bowler in the world.
Brilliant.
Anything else we've seen there in that column?
Sorry, I said Sid Collins. It wasn't Laurie Evans. I knew it was wrong. Laurie Evans was the bloke, not Sid Collins. Sorry.
I'd got there's a bit where he gets another World Cup letter from an England supporter whose name was Mark Thatcher. Now I had to have a look, and the age and dates unfortunately didn't match up, so it's not that one.
That would have been lovely.
Oh, just before you go, because he talks about his pre-match meal, and it says usually it's bacon, eggs, and sausages. With him and Alan Clark, we're the only 2 players who have large breakfasts. We must be up and about by 11 o'clock, and if the weather is dry, we'll have a stroll around the block. The other lads then have the pre-match meal, but Alan and I just have a cup of tea. I just love that. The large breakfast, their eggs, bacon and sausages.
The thing I don't get with that, though, is didn't they notice they felt terrible? Yeah, when I play my pathetic club cricket on a Saturday, yeah, all I can eat is bananas and flapjacks. I can't eat a proper meal till the game's over because I know that a little bit of running about playing cricket will make me feel terrible. See, if you're eating like sausages and bacon and eggs before, surely this felt ill.
What?
Surely there must have been 1 week where they had toast and bananas. So, actually, I feel a lot better. I'll just do that.
I
next
mean,
week.
you're spot on with that, because it's like, if you have a big breakfast like that, what do you want to do? You want to go have another lie down. So it's not something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Unless that was part of the plan, I don't know. But yeah, I would say change days, but I'm sure there's still, levels of clubs where this is happening.
Well, I know Dennis Stewart, who I guess is slightly younger, although he just been making when does it 74? So yeah, he'd been around 3 or 4 years by then. And his pre-match meal, he'd have poached salmon and he'd drizzle honey on it to get the sugar from the honey. Mm-hmm. And other players thought he was mad, but he was, it's light protein plus energy from the honey. It's perfect. And so okay, that makes sense. That feels like a modern meal. But it's just, I mean, sausages especially. Surely that would beat something.
All right, Tom.
All right, we go over the page then. I didn't see much here. So there's an advert there, Lawrence for Kicks. So Lawrence trainers and football boots, not a brand name that I was aware of.
No, I never.
Yeah, I mean, I've obviously gone through all the magazines. I've seen quite a few adverts for them. That probably dates to a few years before this as well. I think there was a pair of Lawrence ones which they had 3 stripes as well. So obviously that wouldn't have lasted too much longer. They probably would have been told to stop that. But yeah, they don't look the greatest. They look quite. I mean, there's a trainer and a football boot. The football boot looks as if there's no giving it at all. That looks quite. I don't. One of the things that drives me mad about modern football is these paper thin boots, and all it needs is just a little touch. And I appreciate that it's going to be painful, but then players go down just by little touches, whereas you're not going to feel anything wearing those ones, I don't think. So that's why I say bring back the thicker boot.
Did you have a particular brand of football boot when you were younger, Jonathan?
I was given a pair of early Adidas Predators by Zinedine Zidane.
Okay.
And I mean, they'd still be they're the only boots still in the wardrobe. I haven't worn them for 2006. I retired. But that was one of my first ever journalistic assignments was to go to Brussels. So it must have been the tail end of '99 to play test the Adidas Terrestra Silverstream, the official ball of Euro 2000. And I scored a volley past Edwin van der Sar, lost a dribbling drill against Zinedine Zidane very convincingly, but then scored a free kick, and Alessandro Del Piero patted me on the shoulder and called me maestro, which is probably sarcastic, but I'll take it.
Is this the one where he told you the technique to take the perfect free kick?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't do that, but he did tell me how to do it. Yeah. Yeah, so they had like a metal wall, and I mean, I'm terrible at football. I should preface this. Like, if I was any good at football, this would just sound like me boasting. I'm awful at football, very enthusiastic, very bad. And so there's a line of, I don't know, 20, 30 journalists, however many. And yeah, he steps up, bang, pops a free kick, top corner. And there's no, the first time round, there's no keeper. So it's quite easy to just knock a ball over a wall into an empty net. So pretty much everybody managed that. And then they put an Anderlecht goalkeeping coach in goal. And he smacks it in the top corner. Yeah, perfect. Bend, right in the top corner. And I'm second last in the line of journalists. So I've been shuffling back, just knowing how humiliating it's going to be. And everybody's trying to hit that bit harder. So they're putting it in the wall, they're putting it over. Keeper's saving it. And I realised the keeper was taking a huge hop to his left because everybody was trying to go that top right corner. So I just smashed it bottom left as I was looking at bottom right for him. And his weight was all going the other way and he couldn't get back across. So I was the only one who scored, but I hadn't done what he told us to do. I just smacked the bottom corner. But yeah, he did say this thing about not just striking across the ball, but sort of cocking your foot and uncocking your foot as you strike it. And so I did play in a game about a month later, went back to university, played for my old college team in the game then. and scored one like that with the most extraordinary whip on the ball. I was going for top right, and it clattered into the left-hand post. And I pretended I'd meant it, but I actually was 8 yards off. And then every time I tried it since, I cocked it up.
All right, so the facing page there is Chris Gaines to Spurs, the young Irish star who could match the brilliance of George Best. So it's Chris McGrath, and I've got to say I don't really know much about him. Playing with Tottenham at the time,
never heard of him.
Yeah, and he only played for Manchester United as well. I looked up, but yeah. Couldn't tell you anything about him.
21 Northern Ireland caps as well. So
yeah,
which is pretty. I mean, the stats here: 38 appearances for Spurs, 15 for Millwall on loan, 28 for Man United, and then he went to the States with Tulsa Rednecks. So 21 Northern Ireland caps for what 56? It's less than 80. Appearances is pretty good going, isn't it?
He had a decent career by the looks of it.
The charity partner this season is the West Dunbartonshire Community Food Share. This is a charitable organisation that provides various services and support to the local community, including the following: a school uniform bank, school holiday brunch bags, food provisions, Christmas toy bank, cooking and growing lessons, and a baby bank. They provide essential support to the local community in supporting individuals and families, and we will be looking to support them in any way we can through the podcast. This will include drives for donations of food, money, and support in the form of volunteers. We will also be raising awareness of the group to highlight the work that they do, but also to ensure that families and individuals who can benefit from the group are aware of these vital services. You can follow them on the West Dunbartonshire Community Food Share group on Facebook or West Dunbartonshire Community Food Share.co.uk for the website, and that's West Dunbartonshire with an N. You can also donate through our Just Giving page for the charity at justgiving.com/fundraising/shoot the breeze, one word. Also keep an eye on our Twitter accounts at shoottb_podcast and at Scott's Footy Cards for updates and news on our charity partner. We'd like to say a special thank you to Pete Wiley of the Mighty Wah for the use of the Story of the Blues in the music for our show. You can catch up with Pete on petewiley.co.uk, where you can check out the details of upcoming gigs and new music. We'd also like to thank our producer Diane Jardin for her great work and support on the podcast. Please check out transmissionroom.co.uk, where you can book music recording and rehearsal facilities in Clydebank.
So over the page so a couple of good photographs there, sort of colour posters. On the left hand side, we've got Chico Hamilton of Aston Villa. It says his real name is Ian Hamilton, and he was nicknamed Chico after the jazz drummer Chico Hamilton. That's a great picture. I think just the background as well, you can see all the fans. Looks like an early season game or a late season game because it looks nice and sunny. People have got their jackets off.
No. That's exactly it, isn't it? It's the background that makes it. So the guy in the orange, it looks like an orange jumper, long sleeve t-shirt with his sort of jacket over his folded arms, which just feels like how I spent most Mays of having overdressed and then being really hot on the ground. But then there's also right at the front, there's it's almost like a park railing, the fence. So you've got the tail end of an advertising board and then this sort of black paling fence. And so two kids leaning against that. And it just looks so... You just wouldn't see that in a modern stadium, like this sort of park fence thing. But there's also... I like the bloke bottom left, the old lad in his short sleeve cardigan and tie.
And the guy with his scarf draped across the advertising board, the bar scarf, classic sort of bar scarf.
The scarf there is the only bit of football wear that's in there, not a single replica shirt, which there really wouldn't have been at this time anyway. But there's not much in the way to say we're football fans. That you would, there's shirts, there's ties, there's all sorts going on there.
Well, there's 3 ties, aren't there? I can see 4 ties. Because I have the guy in the sunglasses and the hats wearing a tie as well. So I think there's 4 ties, which if that is, I mean, I suspect it looks like a pre-season friendly to me in terms of weather, but maybe it is till May, maybe it is an early league game in August. But I mean, given this magazine came out in August, presumably it's either a pre-season game or it's the May the previous season. But the fact that the idea that people were still going in ties to football when they weren't going to kind of corporate entertainment, I think it's a very odd idea.
So the two at the top left, I'm going to shout out Brian Little on the left and Des Bremner on the right. That's who they look like, the really fuzzy ones. But yeah, we talk about this all the time, and it's the quality of the photographs back then. They're not, pinpoint, really high definition, and it adds to the quality for me. The fact that it is a little bit fuzzy, it's, that's just adds to it.
But there's sort of a lack of perfection about everything, right? So, his hand, I don't know what he's doing with his fingers there, but it just looks a very ungainly sort of way that he's running. The bits of string tied around his ankles. Yeah, there's a homeliness to it. Whereas, modern football photography is because it's all, obviously digital technology and whatever, brilliantly sharp. But also the people taking the pictures of are sort of perfect physical specimens. Yeah. And I don't mean any offense to Chico Hamilton, who I'm sure was very, very fit by the standards of the time. But he's not a perfect specimen in the way that, I don't know, Paul Pogba or somebody is a perfect physical specimen.
And the opposite page there is Paul Medley, Leeds United, a classic yellow Admiral Leeds United kit.
Yeah, that's a lovely picture, isn't it? Kind of the pose is great. The sort of raised right foot just as he's laying off a volley. And I think Medley's massively underrated as a player because he could pretty much play anywhere. He played, I think when Leeds won the League Cup in when was that, 68? I think he played centre forward that day, and you sort of think of him as a fullback or fill-in midfielder. But I know that's a sort of, obviously modern squads, you don't have to do that, but to have somebody who can play pretty much, can fill in according to injuries, I think was so valuable back then. I think Madeley's one of those players who we slightly forget about now.
I think we've just got a slight view of the sock ties as well, the famous Leeds United, the numbered sock tags at the top.
Just at the side there.
Well, that was all part of, and the badge as well was all part of their. I mean, both of them were Paul Trevelyan who did the You Are the Ref. I was his attempt to sort of help improve the image of the club. But I was wondering as well with that, whether the fact that Bremner was doing that column, whether that was Leeds trying to sort of be more public facing. After the sort of 60s and the sort of us against the world mentality, and an attempt to reach out.
Well, talking about Paul Trevelyan, then the likes of when they lined up and waved to the crowd and then turned round and waved, that was him again. So
with the tracksuits with their names on the back.
As you obviously know, that he was coming up with all these ideas just to get an involvement with the fans and to raise the profile.
All right, we can go over the page again. For this is Kevin Keegan's column. Keep up with Kevin Keegan, and there's a picture of him there just having got off the plane. I
think he's phoning himself.
Absolutely extraordinary get up.
He's massive Lionel Blair's, I was going to say. He's 2 bags of duty free, and he's
Yogi Löw haircut. Just it's like he's decided to dress as a pepper pot or something. It's just fair play. He can get away with it. I certainly couldn't.
So his column, Keep Up with Kevin Keegan, and it's Bill Shankly is Liverpool. And so Shankly's not long left the Liverpool job here. And Kevin talks about when he discovered it by getting off the plane from a Tony Up trip to Spain, where a fan just randomly ran up to him to say, "Did you know Bill Shankly's resigned? He's retired." Which is it's kind of odd, the kind of way you would find out something like that at the time. A player would find out big news like that by just somebody coming up to him in the street.
Well, again, that's and even before everybody's on their phone all the time. I remember interviewing Dragoslav Šekulovac, the great Serbian player, and he played in that last game for Red Star for Sven Zvezda before the Munich air crash, and he missed a late chance. And Šekulovac, I don't know, he died 3 or 4 years ago now. But he said he was always haunted he missed a late chance in that game. And if he'd scored, it would have levelled the scores in aggregate. And he always thinks, well, then we'd have needed a replay, so maybe they wouldn't have been on that plane. And I think realistically, they would have been on that plane because they had to for the league fixture on a Saturday. But he says it nags away at him. But the way he found out, he was at a cinema in Zemun, in suburb of Belgrade, came out from a film, and a kid ran up to him on the steps, and he just thought he wanted an autograph. And the kid said, "Have you heard about the plane?" And so again, it's it's only what that I guess is 64 years ago, but this not even 50 years ago, but such a different way of finding out how things happened.
Mm-hmm.
But then the Shankly retirement was it shocked everybody, didn't it? The press were gathered and they assumed it was a new signing.
Yeah,
and he comes out and says, "I'm retiring." Because he was only 60 or 61.
Right.
I think Busby was 59 when he retired, wasn't he? But Busby obviously had both the physical and emotional strain of Munich. But Shankly appeared to have all his energy, and it's the cup final that year when they beat Newcastle 3-0 had been one of the great Liverpool performances, and everybody sort of thought that he'd go on for a lot longer. And then of course he regretted it, didn't he? Started hanging around the training ground, and Paisley had to say,
that's what Keegan's saying. It'll be strange to not see him around the training grounds. Yeah, and then I think he just kept coming until Bob Paisley had said, "Can you?"
Yeah, and then he was left very, very bitter about that. But it's a hard thing, isn't it? I think you see it with Alex Ferguson, but I don't think his presence at Old Trafford is particularly helpful for new managers. But at the same time, you can't say he can't turn up when he's. So I don't know. I mean, I guess going to games is a bit different to turn up at the training ground, but still, the fact that every time a goal goes in against United, or they draw a game they should have won or whatever, the cameras cut straight to Fergie. And you have that sort of look of disapproval, and it feels like even if he's not, it feels like he's judging the manager.
Mm.
And I think as well, it's when you mentioned Sturm Graz earlier on that Ask the Expert page. I've just written a tribute for Vitor Osim, who died yesterday as we record this. Great. He's the last ever manager of Yugoslavia before the war. But a huge figure in Bosnian football, was coach of Sturm Graz during their golden period in the 90s, was coach of Japan for a long time. And he was saying that I interviewed him, it's a while ago now, I think it was 2009, but he was saying that he can't leave football behind. So when he's got nothing to do, he just goes down the local playground and watches the kids playing. And I think Shankly was the same. He hadn't appreciated how much he needed the routines of it. And I think that was particularly true of Shankly, because he was someone who did everything by routine. Those stories of him walking up and down the training ground at Melwood, moving the stones, of going over and over and over and over again, matches in his mind, working out what to do. He had a very life very driven by routine. And then when he broke that suddenly, he ended up going to Everton, didn't he? It was the only place he felt at home, which is. He should have left Liverpool. It's easy to say now, but that's what he should have done. And then he could have gone and watched, Preston or Aberdeen or Southampton or whoever. But these sort of little domestic tragedies that just lost his purpose after he'd retired.
I think Ron Yeats used to take him into the dressing room and he managed Tranmere.
Right. Okay. Ron Yates obviously had been a huge. He'd done a huge amount for Ron Yates.
Yeah.
His career. So, but just trying to get any kind of contact.
Yeah. Football. Anything else in there, Andy, that you've seen? I think it's mainly all about Bill Shankly and that.
Leaning on.
On there.
the one thing I did, because we sometimes talk about whether these are ghostwritten or actually the people themselves, and just I'm going to read this. At first I thought he was joking, but then I saw he was deadly serious. I stopped in my tracks, my hand luggage containing family presents falling to the tarmac. I was stunned. It's just a bit melodramatic, isn't it? You can imagine the video that goes with this, the broken bottles of booze, and I just saw that was brilliant. That was brilliant. I hope that was him.
Right, okay, over the page again. So we're going to Newsdesk, compiled by Peter Stewart. So anything we've seen from here? A few interesting. Well, it's obviously very much filler thing, as you were speaking about earlier there, Jonathan. But
the first one, more space. So Halifax players will have a little more room in which to work next season. Manager John Mulhall has believed for some time that the Shea pitch was too narrow, so work was carried out during the summer to widen the present 70 yards playing area. He says the narrowness of the pitch has stifled wingers in general play down the flanks. There were a few goals scored at the Shea last season, and I'm sure that was a major reason. If a wider pitch does mean more goals, then I hope it's Halifax that gets them. So I did look at the record. So the season that we're talking about before, they scored 49 goals in the season, 33 at home. They scored 48 in total the next season after widening the pitch, but they scored 23 at home. So, that was the other way about. So the previous season they scored 48 goals, 23 at home. The next season they scored 49 goals, 33 at home. So they scored an extra 10 goals. So, I mean...
Yeah. Fair play. I mean, the former Sunderland player, of course, George Hall. So, always happy to give him benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
But it's just such a bizarre. This whole double page is so bizarre. None of it matters. None of this is particularly interesting. And like, seriously, your lead story is a thing about Halifax's pitch being widened.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, in a sense, it's nice that they. It's not sort of big four, big six dominated. But again, I'm trying to work out what kind of sort of 1970s teenager would have been. Oh my God, Halifax have widened their pitch. Dad, Halifax have widened their pitch. Like, and then the thing you were saying about the long hair.
yeah.
Basically that they'd seen Ayala in the World Cup with long hair. And then they've realised some Airdrie player, what's his name, Stuart Gallagher,
Yeah.
actually has longer hair. I suppose footballers' hair has been a staple for many, many years, but still, it seemed weak, frankly.
Yeah, and they've got Dundee United's tour to the Netherlands as well.
Yeah. I mean, the something we've noticed about these sort of pages in the past is. And it's been evident when there's been like 3 stories separately over the 2 pages, all about Highland League games or teams, and you're thinking somebody's up there for a wee jolly, and this is they're saying, I'll justify it by coming back with a few wee stories that we could just throw in there. So the other one, Peter Morris. So the Canaries could look to midfield star for goals. So this is on solving Norwich City's goal scoring problem. He says, I once scored 7 goals in a cup final for a school team, which is great. But he then went on to score 1 goal in 66 league games for City. So that wasn't really... Yeah, I don't know about using the justification for scoring 7 goals.
It's almost like there's a step up in level between school football and league football.
Knew?
Right, we go over the page again then.
Oh, there was a Clydebank connection in there, Tom.
Yes. Oh, was it?
Did you miss it?
I did miss it, aye.
So, Hughes Best. Tommy Hughes started at Clydebank before joining Chelsea in 1966. He made 11 appearances as an understudy to Peter Benetti, and he played for Hereford between 73 and 82. So, there we go. We like to shoehorn in. Tom and I are both Clydebank supporters. So, any chance we get for any sort of Clydebank link, then that gets highlighted. So
Yeah.
I'd never do that with Sunderland. Not my kind of behaviour at all.
Shocking.
Well, I don't know if you're aware, Jonathan, but Clydebank and Sunderland have actually played each other. This was back when Clydebank were ES Clydebank, and Sunderland came to inaugurate the floodlights at New Kilbowie Park back in, I think it was February 1965. So ES Clydebank had drawn with Hibs in the Scottish Cup on the Saturday, and we played Sunderland 2 days later and 2 days before the replay. Sunderland won 5-1.
Get in, come on!
With the goals from Harry Hoods, Nick Sharkey.
Nick Sharkey, a good player.
So there was six Scots in the Sunderland team.
Yeah, I mean, Nick Sharkey he sort of ended up being sort of Clough's replacement after Clough did his knee, didn't he?
Right.
It was a beautiful goal he scores. I think it's against Bury. I mean, yeah, not many goals exist from that period, but it's a really beautiful counter attack, and it's worked down the right. I think it's Roger Usher who had a massive forehead, the right winger, and he knocks it inside the fullback and runs around the other side and hits the cross, and Sharkey comes in the back. And Sharkey was only about 4'2", but comes in the back post and heads it in.
I believe they still talk about that Clydebank victory down at Sunderland, don't they?
I mean, it's pretty much the last thing we won. So,
so we go over the page, right? So, we advert for Puma, and there's a wee quiz about the police.
Yeah, what's that about?
Yeah, well, I think we spoke about this before, Andy. Did we speak about this when Stuart Weir was on? I think we spoke about it when David F. Ross was on, but he was saying it's a sort of, it was a sort of recruitment thing. They were sort of, aiming at teenagers to join the police.
Okay.
I think was the idea behind these things.
There was quite a few army ones as well, round about this sort of, just throughout the different periods actually. But yeah, I don't know if anybody else tried it, but I think I maybe got about 50%.
Yeah, I mean, the first one I was pretty confident on, but I'm afraid my knowledge of how long personal radio batteries lasted in the early 70s was sorely lacking.
Yeah, I'm still not sure about that, whether it's the charge or the battery itself they're talking about, because they do say a year, don't they? Then it lasts for a year, so I don't think the charge lasts for a year, surely.
No, surely not. Yeah.
And
again, it's not a field I feel comfortable in. So,
so the facing page there is you are the ref. So have we picked out any of the questions? Any of the questions there we want to look at?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of I always found this with you are the ref that basically you can do about one a month, and beyond that, the scenarios get so preposterous that. I mean, the one in number 3, which is so a goalkeeper, I presume, has sort of scuffed a goal kick and it's just dribbled outside of his box, and he's able to run and get to the ball first, and then dribble it back in his box and pick it up. And what do you do? And it says I got that one wrong. I assumed you just be take the goal kick again, but apparently it's an indirect free kick. Because well, there was an instance. I want to say it was Joe Hart. I could be wrong about that. Is at Stamford Bridge fairly recently when I think he slipped in taking a goal kick or something and ended up kicking the ball twice. And he was allowed to take it again. And because whoever he would have been, I don't know, would he have been playing for City then? Whoever he was playing for conceded. Like he was appealing, no, you've got to stop it. I've kicked it twice. I've got to take this again. And it turned out he was right. Mm-hmm. So yeah, this seems different to that, but I guess maybe taking the ball outside the box, bring it back in.
Leaving the penalty area, so the ball hadn't left the penalty area, so he could kick it twice. Whereas in this scenario, the ball's left the penalty.
Yeah, maybe that is it. Yeah, but I mean, I was thinking about this. I don't know why this occurred to me yesterday, but how weird loads of those old laws for restarting games are. So, like, why did the ball have to leave the box? Why was that a good idea? It doesn't make any sense. I guess the idea was that the opponent couldn't get the ball before it got out of the box. But also kickoffs. Why did the ball have to go forward? Mm-hmm. And I guess it's a sign of how the games, it used to be a game about territory and about field position. in the same way that rugby is, and increasingly it's become about possession. And as touch has got better, and as movements got better, and as players move more, holding the ball has become more important than getting the ball in dangerous areas. But it just strikes me, it was almost like they had the pitch markings and had to work out what to use them for, rather than being sort of a rational way of starting the game.
In this one, I think the first one is probably the most interesting one to pick out. It says, you award an indirect free kick in the penalty area against the defending team just before time runs out in the first half. Do you A, blow for time, B, blow immediately the ball is kicked, or C, await the outcome of the kick? Now, I would have said C, based on the current rules. You let the free kick happen. But the answer here is A, you blow for time straight away, which is just... Can you imagine that happening in a game?
Well, it's sort of an extreme version of the Clive Thomas phenomenon, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which was 78.
Brazil, Sweden.
Yeah, when Zico scored the header from the corner, but he'd blown for full time, over half time. I think it was. Was it half time, full time, whichever?
Yeah. Full time, I think it was. Yeah.
Just as the corner was taken, and it was adamant. No, this is exactly the right amount of time to play.
Thomasy. Yeah.
But you don't get indirect free kicks in the box anymore, do you? They've sort of been. Now that obstructions are no longer in the fence, they don't really exist anymore.
I do think that is the case, and I think it's quite a recent thing, isn't it? The last couple of years.
Yeah.
All right, we going over the page again. Yeah, World Cup follow-up. This is quite a good couple of articles here. So on the left-hand side page, we've got the clown. The Polish, I've had the last laugh. Again, like you were mentioning this earlier on, but Thomas Sheck having played the sort of game of his life, you know, and it was kind of accentuated with Brian Clough's comments in the commentary in the pundit box, saying referring to him as a clown. I think that just kind of highlighted what a good game he had that night.
Yeah, I mean, this double page, it sort of feels very modern, sort of interviewing kind of pretty high-profile foreign players. I guess the World Cup gives it more of a hook. But yeah, I mean, Tomaszewski, the thing is, Clough was right. He was a clown. He was a very unorthodox keeper. I don't think many of the defenders he played with necessarily appreciated him all the time. But he had a brilliant game in that game. And he had a massive personality, which I think, particularly back then for keepers, was half a battle. And he sort of become this... who's he the equivalent of? But he's just sort of if he was English, he'd be on TalkSport. Like, you know, he's just a mouth for hire these days. I mean, I interviewed him a few years ago, and it was a great interview because he's told all the anecdotes a million times. He tells them all very well, and he quite revels in saying controversial and outrageous things. But even his media profile now is slightly clownish. I mean, Clough wasn't wrong. It looked unfortunate when he went on to produce about 30 brilliant saves in the one game. And
the facing page there has got Joe Saldana, the former manager of Brazil, sort of analysing their performance at the 1974 World Cup.
Yeah, I mean, Saldana was a journalist.
Right.
He then became national manager. I mean, he had a playing background. But he should have really been a manager in 1970. He was sacked tail end of 69 or beginning of 70 because basically the pressure got to him, and he'd started saying some really weird stuff about his best players. He said he was considering dropping Pele because his eyesight wasn't good enough. He had some problem with Tostão. I can't remember exactly what that was. And then there was a coach of I think it was called Justrich, a club coach, Flamengo or somebody. He criticised him, and he found out he was staying in a hotel and went down the hotel with a gun. And thankfully, Justrich was out. And at that point, and the problem was he was very, very left wing at a period when Brazil had a very, very right wing military government, and he was very critical of the government. What was he called? The Brazilian dictator at the time. But he wanted a player from a club he supported picked for the squad, and Saldana had said, I don't pick his cabinet, he shouldn't pick my team, and sort of a combination of these things. But the gun was the sort of the final straw. They removed him for Zagallo, and obviously it was justified in the sense that they went on to have a brilliant World Cup in 1970. But then they changed completely how they played for 74. That they brought in this sort of PT instructor from the army to be the coach, and they'd seen what happened in 66, where they'd been kicked out of the World Cup really by Portugal and Hungary and Bulgaria. And 1970, they knew they could get away with it because of the altitude in Mexico. It wasn't going to be such a hard running physical game, but they really went to the physical extreme in 74, and that was very much the sort of football Saldana was against. So I think he was always primed. Yeah, so the headline is, I'm glad Brazil failed. But that was always going to be the line he was going to take, that he just didn't like the people in charge of Brazilian football at the time or the style of football it imposed.
Andy, anything you want to say about this too?
Certainly the Saldana interview, the whole thing is really honest, open, forthright. He comes across sometimes as being a bit bitter, but it really is much better, much more enjoyable reading than the stock answers that you get from managers and stuff nowadays.
Yeah, but it should be said, both of these two people are notable gobshites.
Okay.
I mean, it might be partly of its time, but I think they were people who enjoyed being provocative.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, it certainly does come across as quite bitter about a lot of it, but he's certainly not afraid to make that bitterness known. Yeah.
All right, we can over again.
Yep.
Then. So, how West Germany won the World Cup, and this is very much a photo feature, and again, very much of its time. A nice wee team group there of the West German team after they've won the World Cup, and there's photographs of the equaliser and the winning goal, as well as Bertie Vogts there celebrating, and Setmar and Beckenbauer with the trophy.
Yeah, they're sort of oddly sort of muddy pictures, aren't they? I know it was a wet day in Munich, but for the photo spread, it's oddly unarresting. But I guess, again, as you say, it's of its time. And how do you sort of represent the equaliser in 7 pictures without them being these sort of muddy long range shots? I love those German tracksuits, and Setmeyer's goalkeeping top, the sort of pale blue for goalkeepers. I'm a big fan of.
I agree with you about the fault or the layout of it. I don't think it works, and I think this could have been done over 4 pages, and made it a bit bigger, because you looking at that, you're trying to work out what's going on a bit. So
yeah. Well, to be honest, I just don't think photos work. I think it should be done by diagrams if you're going to do it, and then you can actually write the names on, and you can put arrows to explain what you're actually talking about. Whereas this is just sort of, I know what's happening because I've seen the video of it, but if I hadn't, I wouldn't.
It's worked for Steve McGarry, isn't it, Tom?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
It was a few years to come yet. So Steve, I don't know if you're aware of Steve McGarry, the cartoon.
No,
he did a lot of match illustrations. He did some in shoot, but a lot of the match ones, things like goal of my life and things like that, and all that sort of stuff. But we've had him in a previous podcast. But that would be exactly the sort of thing that he does so well, is to put it, as you say, in a diagram.
All right, I'll hand it over to you for the next bit.
So it's your chance to have a focus on feature for yourself. So we're going to throw some questions at you in the same style that the footballers would have got back in the day.
Okay.
Give me your answers. We'll start with, what's your full name?
Jonathan Wilson.
What's your birthplace?
Sunderland.
What was your first car?
I'd never driven. Don't have a car.
Okay.
Never had a car.
Who's your favourite player of all time?
That's really hard. Probably Sean Elliott. who was a sort of ball-playing centre-back for Sunderland in the early 80s, played England 21s, basically had a tangle with Graham Souness and was never quite the same again, and missed the 85 League Cup final through suspension with disastrous consequences.
Okay, next question. I think we've established this. Favourite team?
Sunderland.
Okay, what's your most memorable match?
I think that's it's quite easy. It would be the FA Cup quarter-final replay against Chelsea in 1992. So Sunderland's second division team. We'd sacked Dennis Smith between Christmas and New Year. He'd been replaced by his assistant Malcolm Crosby, who you may remember looked a bit like Robin Williams playing Willy Wonka. Sort of big curly hair, significant nose. And our league form was pretty poor under him. It was okay. I mean, we didn't get relegated, which had been a possibility. But suddenly in the cup, things took off. And we beat West Ham in a replay in the 5th round. And then went to Chelsea, scabbed a 1-1 draw with a 83rd minute John Byrne equaliser. And then back at Roker for the replay. It was the best atmosphere ever. There's probably only about 25,000 there, but 25,000 in Roker felt absolutely rammed. Chelsea had the whole of the Roker end. My dad would only go in the Roker end because he was a silly, stubborn old man, and so he didn't go to the game. I was in the full end with my mates, and we were brilliant first half. Took the lead through Peter Davenport, but as the second half went on, you could tell we'd run out of steam completely. Chelsea were absolutely all over us. And Tony Norman made 2 or 3 stunning saves. Cascarino hit the bar when he had an open goal. There's a couple of incredible misses. And just as you start to think, we might get away with this, 84th minute, 86th minute, 5 minutes ago, whatever, Dennis Wise scores to equalise. And you think, I turned to my mate Peter, who's next to us, so he's still a mate now, the lad I was at school with, and said, God, I really hope we concede before full time, because if this goes extra time, we could get absolutely hammered here and we don't deserve that. And then I think it was a Paul Bracewell long diagonal. And David Rush had come off a bench. It was useless, but he was local and he'd scored a winner against West Ham. So he had a bit of publicity, bit of press. And he miscontrols it. And I think it was Frank Sinclair. I can only assume he sort of realised it was David Rush and had been a bit spooked by the pre-match coverage of this wonder kid. Just concedes a corner for no reason at all. He literally could have just stood there and let David Rush have a shot and it wouldn't have mattered. But he puts it out for a corner. And Brian Atkinson takes the corner. And this is far end of the ground to us. And Gordon Armstrong, who's very good in the air, meets it. And you can tell it's a good header. Like everything looks right on the header. And you can see it looping towards the corner. You can see Dave Besant diving. And it took forever. It took several hours to go in. And the whole time I was aware of this conversation in my brain, going, it's going in. A little bit going, why is it not in yet? It should be in already. And then you see, because of the camera on the pitch, you couldn't really see the goal line. So you saw the Chelsea fans sort of slump as one behind that goal, which you see the net shake, and we know it's gone in. I know everybody goes berserk. And it was only when I got home and saw it on telly that the reason it's taking so long was he was at the edge of the box. He was 18 yards out. So everything, it should have been like ahead of my 8 yards. Yeah. That was a dynamic of it. But he was at the edge of the box. It just seemed to take forever. And then, even then, there was sort of 3 or 4 minutes left. I remember John Kay, who was our hard as nails right back. Absolutely. And he played at Wimbledon. I don't know if was he there at Wimbledon when Vinnie Jones was there? I'm not sure. But Vinnie Jones was playing for Chelsea that day. And he absolutely nails Vinnie Jones about 25 yards out. And there's no need to do it. He could only have been doing it to make a point. Actually, I'm the hard man here. And he decides to do it in injury time when we're clinging on to a 2-1 lead, giving Chelsea a free kick in a dangerous place. But to be honest, even at the time, I thought, fair enough. I quite enjoyed that. And we held on and 1-2-1. And my dad watched the highlights on Sports Night later on because he wouldn't go because he couldn't go on his favourite bit of the ground.
Okay, next one. What's been your biggest thrill?
What in
Just
football
in
or
life in general?
Well, I mean, the moment. The problem is in professional life, you achieve a major step, and pretty quickly it just sort of feels normal. Mm-hmm. But I remember in Champions League final 2004. So I'd covered the Champions League final in Manchester in 2003, but it was in Manchester, so it's a big occasion. Juve v Milan, not the greatest game, but it was still felt like a big event, and I was covering it. But the next year, going to Gelsenkirchen to cover it, that felt bigger because you were actually going away to cover this major final. And we didn't know how big Jose Mourinho would become, but you sort of knew Mourinho was sort of a fun figure. And then just as I was outside the ground, my phone went, and it was my agent to say he'd agreed a deal to sell my first book. So that day professionally was brilliant because I was covering a Champions League final, the first abroad Champions League final I'd done, and I got a book deal on the same day. So I would say that sort of 20 minutes as I approached the ground and got that phone call.
Okay, on the flip side, what's been your biggest disappointment?
My first sort of proper job in football journalism was for a website called onefootball.com, and it was ahead of its time. It was so this was 2000 I started, and it covered sort of football across Europe and into South America and Africa. It had a load of really great staff, and we all young. It was classic sort of .com bubble thing. Loads of the people who worked on that website had gone on to kind of fairly significant jobs in football journalism. There was an amazing energy about the place. Everybody was young. Everybody was really committed to it. And then just after the World Cup in 2002, for complicated financial reasons that I won't go into now, but really nothing to do with the site or the funding of the site itself, we went bankrupt. The debt was loaded onto us by another part of the company. So, I mean, in some ways, it got me out of there into more mainstream media and better paid media. And it had given me 2 years of brilliant education in how football journalism works and in contacts all over the world. But that was a really crushing moment. This thing we'd worked on incredibly hard for not a huge amount of money and for reasons that had nothing to do with us. It failed.
Okay, what's the best country that you've visited? Imagine there's been a few.
Yeah, I mean, the two I'd go back to still are Argentina and Hungary. I mean, are they the best countries? I mean, they've clearly both got pretty significant issues in terms of their economies, in terms of their governments, in terms of past dalliances with the far right. But Buenos Aires and Budapest, I think, are both incredibly beautiful cities, a sense of faded grandeur, the football culture. I mean, Hungary has struggled, obviously, for the last sort of 20 or 30 years. And the way it's coming back now with Orban is, I think, not necessarily healthy. But researching, their football cultures of really from sort of 1920 through to about 1970, that's the stuff I've really enjoyed. And both of them have these sort of great sort of cafe cultures where, old footballers are delighted somebody's come from England to see them and will just sit there and tell you every anecdote they know and give you every opinion they've got for hours and hours and hours. And as a historian or a researcher or a journalist, that's a brilliant thing. And they're both great food and drink cities as well. So I've got a huge amount of affection for both Hungary and Argentina while being acutely conscious of their political problems.
Which leads us nicely on to the next question. What's your favourite food? And if you're stuck for an answer, steak and chips is always the
I've got nothing against steak and chips. I mean, can I say a tasting menu, like a nice 16-course tasting menu? Like, what I like is interesting food. So, I'm going out for dinner for lunch next Sunday, and for we got rabbit on the menu, and I really like rabbit. It's high protein, low fat. I think you do. It's really hard to cook well. It's very easy to make it very dry. But I'm already looking forward to that rabbit just because it's very hard to get good rabbit. And I think it's something that I can't believe we got this hobby horse. I feel like every conversation I have now, I get my rabbit hobby horse. In the days for myxomatosis, pretty much the prime source of maybe that's a slight exaggeration, but a very major source of protein for working class people, for poor people, was rabbits, because there were thousands of them and you could catch them, and they were very, very healthy. And then with myxomatosis, obviously the population declines drastically. When Jack Charlton was a kid, when he left school and joined up at the mine, he had a job on the surface for 5 or 6 weeks, basically sifting coal, just like taking out the bad coal as it went along the conveyor belt. But before he got there, he'd go an hour early, set these snares in the field near the mine, and then after he finished work, he'd go and pick up the rabbits he caught and he'd sell them around the miners. So he's making more money from his rabbit poaching than he was from the mining. And I think that was pretty common. So the loss of rabbit as a source of cheap protein, I think, is one of the great culinary disasters of 20th century Britain. But as I say, I'm aware that's a niche position, and I may now be sounding like a lunatic.
Yeah. It's okay. We'll edit that very sympathetically. Miscellaneous likes. So give us a couple of things that you like to do.
Well, I've just got into growing camellias, which is a new thing for me. I've just got a bit of outdoor space. I've moved in a new flat last July, and my camellias are doing very nice, better than my ilexes. So I never thought I'd get into that. I've got a wormery to try and produce compost from leftover coffee grounds. So yeah, that would be my new thing. But I read a lot. I love detective drama on telly. I mean, basically, I've been middle-aged since I was about 3-year-old. And the great thing is now I am middle-aged and everybody else is catching up with me. It's just I know Columbo better than them.
Okay.
Here's a question for you. How many eyes did Columbo have, and how do we know?
Oof. I don't know. Are we talking?
Because Peter Falk. Well, Peter Falk only had one eye.
Right.
But did he play Columbo one-eyed or two-eyed?
I'm going to say 2 eyes.
No, he plays him one-eyed, and we know this because in episode 2 of series 13, he gets another detective in on an interview and makes the joke, 3 eyes are better than one. So we know he played him as one-eyed.
Who's it? Have you got a favourite Columbo villain?
William shit.
That's like choosing between your children, isn't it? Even if you've got one, you probably better not admit it.
I saw one recently that I don't know that I knew about it, but it was Billy Connolly.
Yeah, Billy Connolly was in one.
Was he really? I didn't know that.
There's a Columbo where Billy Connolly's the baddie, and Billy Connolly's just playing himself. It must have been before the Mrs. Brown where he actually did some acting. So yeah, have a look out for that one.
Yeah, no, I will do. Yeah.
The other one that I always think about is William Shatner as well. Who, that's one of my favourites.
You know that Spielberg directed the very first episode.
Yeah.
No, really?
Yeah, the first 90 seconds of that are absolutely stunning. So I think it's called Murder by the Book, and there's this 2 blokes who've written a load of screenplays and things together. And one of them's trying to go, but the talented one's trying to go solo, so the other one ends up killing him. But it starts off with him typing in this office, and you can see out the window this grey convertible pulling up down the street. And it's just this long tracking shot that kind of zooms in and zooms out. And eventually, he gets out of the car and comes up to the door with a gun. It's just, I mean, it helps it's Spielberg, but it's just a stunning 90 seconds of. There's no dialogue, just building the tension, seeing the 2 characters.
I'll check that one out. Okay, on the flip side again, miscellaneous dislikes. So give me a couple of things that drive you up the wall.
Yeah, I was talking about this yesterday. Pottery. Like, you go to a gallery or a museum or something, and like there's loads of pottery. I don't care. I like painting. I like sculpture. I like pottery. It's just cups, just cups and saucers, isn't it? So I find pottery very boring. I mean, the classic footballer's answer is people who are rude, isn't it? But I don't really mind them, to be honest. I probably am one of them. I mean, I live right by the Thames. I really hate party boats that go up and down, blasting music at incredibly loud volumes until the early hours, which I guess is under the footballer's category of inconsiderate people. Eggs. I don't like eggs. I don't mind them in cake and bread, but I can't eat eggs by themselves. Omelettes, no. Well, yeah, will
Yes,
that do?
absolutely. I would say about eggs. My sister is a 50%er in that she'll eat the yolks, but she won't touch the whites.
Ah.
Yeah, I know.
And that
We've always
seems-
thought that was a bit
seems
crazy
complicated
and a
confused.
bit wasteful. But there we go.
Yeah.
Okay, next question, and we may already know the answer to this. Favourite TV show?
Well, it would definitely be a detective drama. I think Endeavour. I think Endeavour's better than Morse. It took me a long time to accept that position, but I think I always knew deep in my heart that Endeavour's better than Morse. We had a couple of slightly odd episodes during the pandemic, but I'll cut them some slack and say it was the pandemic kind of affected filming conditions. I mean, the one set around the football club was pretty bizarre. But the early series of Endeavour, I think are magnificent. Like getting the period detail and also sort of foreshadowing what's going to happen in Morse.
Okay, favourite singers or groups?
See, I've never owned any music. So this is, I never owned a car, never owned any music. So my dad worked for Garage and my mum was a music teacher. So that's my very banal, passive-aggressive teenage rebellion. I mean, I occasionally listen to music to drown out the sound. I used to live above a creche, so you used to occasionally listen to music to drown out the sound of a creche when I was working. So I'd listen to a lot of Morricone scores. Anything with lyrics I think is difficult to work to. And what I found doing that is, especially when you're writing a book, it's a very easy way to trick your brain into getting into the right mental space to do the book. So if you play particular music, it puts you in a particular tonal place. So I found for The Names Not Long Ago, I end up listening to a lot of Leonard Cohen. So let's say Leonard Cohen, but I really don't know what I'm talking about.
Okay. Favourite actor or actors?
God, it's tough, isn't it? I mean, Sean Evans, obviously playing Endeavour, I think does a great job. Who would I always watch? I didn't think Sean Evans was that good. What's that submarine thing called? I didn't think he was great in that. Well, that was The Apart, I think, rather than him. But God, I find that hard.
We can leave that one if you want.
Well, no, I mean, it's one of those. I feel like I've got too many answers. I shared a birthday with Tom Hanks. Don't know if that should sway my decision at all, but it's a fact. I thought Alan Armstrong was brilliant playing George Oldfield in that Channel 4 documentary about the Ripper. Well, not sorry, documentary, a drama about the Ripper. So yeah, that's a very niche thing to have said. No, it was a mate of mine saw him on the bus the other day, took a picture of him and said, "Who's this?" I recognise him. And that's why Alan Armstrong's near the front of me. But he was brilliant in that. Let's leave it with Sean Evans, Alan Armstrong, and Tom Hanks.
Okay. Next one. So there's only a few left. Who's your best friend?
Oh. No, I mean there's sort of half a dozen who could fall in that category.
Don't
So
want to
I
upset
think
anybody.
in politics.
Okay, fair enough. Who's been the biggest influence on you? So either personal or work related.
Well, I mean, it's a very banal and obvious answer, but my mum was a huge influence on us. Then professionally, I mean, Kevin McCarra was very good to me when I first started as a journalist. He just got the Guardian job. Did you know Kevin?
I'm aware of him.
Yes, I mean, he died last year or the year before. Very sad. He's only 60. So he was a huge help at the start. Was he an influencer? I don't know. I mean, I'm very fortunate at the Guardian to work with Barney Ronner and Johnny Lou, both of whom I would always read and you try and learn from them. I think Sam Wallace at the Telegraph. I think he does the job brilliantly, and because the stuff's behind the paywall, he maybe doesn't get the credit he should get. But I mean, do they count as influencers? People you read regularly because you sort of think I should be feeding off this. Miguel Delaney at the Independent, who's will be one of those in the mate category as well. Yeah, I mean his energy is extraordinary. So yeah, I don't know if that's enough of an answer.
Okay, final question: which person in the world would you most like to meet?
Well, if I can slightly change that and make it who I most like to have met, the Hungarian coach Martin Bukovi, who I think is probably the greatest tactician of the 20th century. Clearly a very, very difficult man. So probably he would have sort of, balled me out after about 30 seconds. And I mean, he was clearly very difficult. He was also clearly a very brave and very good man. So he was coach of Kretinsky Zagreb during the Second World War, and the groundsman was Jewish, and he hid him, or the groundsman hid under the stand, and he took him food. I know had he been caught, he would have been executed for that. I think. Yeah, but I would love to have talked to him about football because I think he was way ahead of his time from the early 30s and constantly evolving. And in many ways, he was the genius behind the Great Hungary of the early 50s. And it worked very well. They had Gustav Sebesh was the manager, who was he was a former player, but he was a politician. He was very good at handling all the communist committees. And there's no way Bukovi could have done that, but Bukovi was giving him tactical advice all the time. So let's say Martin Bukovi.
Thank you for listening to part 1 of the podcast with Jonathan Wilson. Join us next week for part 2.